Let me put it this way. I'd like to think that God is real.
I don't believe in God because the idea that an omniscient, loving being would judge me, who is mortal and ignorant, based on a few years' experience, I find to be rather a cruel thought.
All the power that God has, he, she, it has given to me. So we're definitely one.
I hope there's something else out there. It'd be fun to experience either that or we're all just evolved apes.
I
was raised atheist. I don't believe in a higher power, but I also don't claim to know everything about the world.
I don't know. I don't know if there is one. I just pretend, I guess, and hope that there's something else out there.
Good morning, and welcome to part 2 of our Explore God series. If you're a guest here today, we are just delighted that you decided to join with us, especially if you're on a journey to explore God. Today's question for our consideration is there a God? Now, most of us would say yes, but some of us are still on that journey. And that's what we want to focus on today. Is there a God is something really all of us grapple with at times, just because of stuff we experience, just because of stuff we're going through. Just the mere fact that over 150 churches in the Bay Area are doing this series together makes me say, wow, there is a God. When there's that much community and collaboration among churches in the Bay Area, and I've been serving in the Bay Area for almost 40 years, I've never seen this much unity and cooperation in an effort to communicate with our Bay Area community than I'm seeing right now. And that just tells me that it's a God thing. For the next few weeks, beginning last week, we are going to be on the same page together, all these churches, attempting to answer 7 relevant questions. Does life have a purpose? We talked about that last week. Today, is there a God? Next week, if there is, why does he allow pain and suffering? That's a big question. Is the Christian faith too narrow? Is Jesus really God? Is the Bible reliable? Can we really know God personally? When's the last time that you heard someone say, wow, there is a God? It was probably like me, a little facetious. I said it just a few weeks ago when I birdied a hole on the golf course. That was a divine moment for a bogey golfer. And I looked at the other 2 guys playing with me and I said, wow, there is a God. Well, yes, but he probably isn't that concerned about my golf game. You heard about the golfers that were talking to each other, and one was a priest, and the guy said to the priest, he said, you know if there's going to be golf in heaven? The priest says, yes, I have good news and bad news. There is golf in heaven. Your tee time is tomorrow. For all of us, this question, is there a God, is kind of like a long drive, a long straight drive on a challenging fairway. It's a question that we spend our whole life getting confident at. You see, I think every one of us are born with a quest for God. Some may call that quest the quest for meaning, like you heard in the video. Why would we, without thinking, though, use expressions all the time like, oh my gosh, golly, oh God, or like the Brits, oh my God. When you think of it, there's something personal about that one. oh my God. We say stuff with not even really realizing what we're declaring. Last week, there was a TV interview on The View. A White House cabinet member was mentioning the successes of the Biden administration, especially on the infrastructure projects in the U.S. But there was an open mic in the background, and someone was heard saying, "Oh my God!" right at an inappropriate time in the interview. Whoops. But sometimes our expressions of God are a whoops, that we really don't consider and think about what's actually coming out of our own mouths. I mean, why would we want to damn things and people in the name of God? Why don't you just damn them in your own name? Maybe we do all believe in a God, because we have some innate hint that there is a God, even though we may not have experienced God or understand God. Even children have an interest in God. You may remember yourself as a child being curious or having some kind of experience with God. And maybe life took you another direction, maybe some hurt, maybe some pain, maybe some Christians that didn't act like God, or maybe a church that you got hurt in and caused you to just kind of drift from that childhood experience. Well, today, I welcome you back to explore the God that really loves you. We're all inquisitive. Some inquisitive kids wrote some letters to God that I think you might enjoy. Dear God, are you really invisible, or is that just a trick? Lucy. Dear God, did you really mean do unto others as they do unto you? Because if you did, then I'm going to fix my brother. Dear God, it's okay that you made different religions, but don't you get mixed up sometimes? I like this one. Dear God, maybe Cain and Abel would not kill each other so much if they had their own rooms. That sure works for me and my brother. The good news is that God is not intimidated by your questions or my questions. If you have questions about God, you're welcome here. We're not intimidated by those questions because all of us have questions. We've all written our imaginary letters to God, even if it wasn't literal letter. We've all tossed up prayers in the midst of struggles or pain or fear or concern. And God welcomes those questions. Though he might not write his name in the sky or respond to your letter with a handwritten note, he's given us a lot of indications of his presence. Today, I just want to talk about 3 of those indications of the presence of God. The first is his beauty in creation. That's one of my favorite ways to experience God. David, the shepherd boy that became a king, looked into the evening desert expanse and wrote a song. It's found in the Psalms, Psalms 19, 1 through 4. The heavens proclaim the glory of God. As I read this, just kind of picture looking into the night sky. The heavens proclaim the glory of God. The skies display his craftsmanship. Day after day they continue to speak. Night after night they make him known. Night after night they make him known. They speak without a sound or word. Their voice is never heard, yet their message has gone throughout all the earth and their words to all the world. Creation is God's conversation with us. Who is not inspired by a mountain vista at sunset or the visual infinity of a deep blue ocean? What happens on a moonless night when you lay on your back and you stare into the Milky Way? Right in our own backyard, there is the grandeur of Yosemite Valley, of the Muir Woods, of Sequoia National Park, of the Big Sur coastline, or just a little further up the hill, Lake Tahoe, or way over the Pacific, Napali Coast on the island of Kauai. God's beauty, God's signature is everywhere. This summer, Mary and I had some what we call porch time with God from our cabin deck in Montana's Paradise Valley. That picture was taken with my iPhone from our porch. Our view takes in the green fields of the valley and the winding Yellowstone River under the backdrop of the massive peaks of the Absaroka Range of the northern Rockies. They call it Big Sky. I call it God's country. On occasion, a bald eagle flies by. Deer abound. Bears on occasion. I didn't get close enough to get that shot. A red fox visited our driveway. And so did rattlesnakes and grandkids. They're not the same. I see God in the bright eyes of many of our grandchildren, especially the girls. Anyway, that love Grandpa and Grandma. Can I hear it from some grandchildren here today? Where are you? They were here. Okay, that's good. Oxford professor and theologian N.T. Wright, in his book Simply Christian, says, "We must acknowledge that beauty, whether in the natural order or within human creation, is sometimes so powerful that it evokes our very deepest feelings of awe, wonder, gratitude, and reverence." Would you agree? In the New Testament book called the Romans, the author, the Apostle Paul, makes a very strong argument. He says, "We know the truth about God because he made it obvious to us." He made it obvious to us. "For ever since the world was created, people have seen the earth and the sky. Through everything God made, they can clearly see his invisible qualities, his eternal power, his divine nature, so they have no excuse for not knowing God." Beauty calls us out of ourselves to something bigger, and it also resonates deeply inside of us. The Christian story proclaims that at the heart of the universe is a loving, very present God. Science is not necessarily in conflict with the story of our Creator. Some of the greatest intellects of our time acknowledge the existence of God. One of those is Albert Einstein, one of the most highly recognized and revered scientists of the 20th century, said, "Everyone who's seriously committed to the cultivation of science becomes convinced that in all the laws of the universe," lost my place, "is manifest a spirit vastly superior to man and to which we with our powers must feel humble." Just take a minute and read that one for yourself and just kind of let it, can you bring it back up? Thank you. Take a minute, read that for yourself and just kind of let it sink in. This is from Albert Einstein, one of the smartest men to ever live. I like the last part. "To which we, with our powers, must feel humble." We could quote scientists all day long. We could quote historians, philosophers, theologians, even politicians that have a profound belief in God. But when it really comes down to it, to believe is not just intellectual, it's experiential. I'm not trying to convince your mind today. I hope that God is talking to your spirit. That's why we call this faith. Another word for faith is trust. We were at a retreat one time, and the leader of the retreat says, "We're going to do a trust walk." And I said, what's a trust walk? He said, you'll see. They blindfolded me and said, now, there's going to be a person standing right in front of you, and they're going to lead you by their voice. You just listen to your voice and follow with a blindfold. And this smart guy that was leading me around took me right to a freeway. I'm hearing 18-wheel trucks going down the freeway, and I'm blindfolded, and he's saying, just keep walking, just follow me. Have you ever tried a trust walk? Don't. But that's what this is, our belief in God. It's a trust walk. That's what faith is. A New Testament writer of the Hebrews says, by faith we understand that the entire universe was formed at God's command, that what we now see did not come from anything that we can see. That takes faith. It also takes faith to not believe that. To believe that some things that our scientists try to make up about it. Abraham, the ancient leader, acknowledged by three religions, the Jewish religion, Islamic religion, and Christian faith, had no knowledge of God. He lived in a godless environment. If anything, they were worshiping probably animals or stars or rocks or something. But for some reason, he exercised faith. The Apostle Paul tells us that clearly God's promise to give the whole earth to Abraham and his descendants was based not on his obedience to God's law, but on his right relationship with God that comes by faith. How did somebody who had no exposure to God just all of a sudden say, I believe there's a God and I want to know him? That's faith. For you to say, I believe there's a God and I want to know him. Abraham, who was not a religious, may have walked out into the night air of the desert in what the Bible calls the Ur of the Chaldees, which is now southern Iraq. And in some kind of communication with God, he was led to leave his homeland, go 1,000 miles away and form a new nation and a new faith in what is now called Palestine, or was called Palestine, now Israel. That's faith. It's very likely that he was seeking to know, is there a God? And God answered his inquiry and rewarded his faith. Again, the New Testament writer to the Hebrews says, it is impossible to please God without faith. It's impossible to please God without faith or trust. Anyone who wants to come to him must believe that God exists and that he rewards those who sincerely seek him. You want to know God? You want to experience God? You want him to reveal himself to you? Sincerely, authentically, genuinely seek him and watch what happens. So today, I want to encourage you to ask your question genuinely and seek him. Paul, the New Testament apostle that I mentioned, was talking to philosophers and worshipers in Athens. They were worshiping stones and idols and so on. And he says, God's purpose was for the nations, not just one nation, not just one people, not just one religion. God's purpose was for the nations to seek after God and perhaps feel their way toward him and find him, though he is not far from any of us, for in him we live and move and exist. That's mind-boggling. In him we live and move and exist. Actually, according to this, our very existence is dependent on God's existence. Without God, we're not here. I mean, who really exists, God or you and I? I mean, what if God just woke up one day and says, I don't believe people exist? The second indicator that points beyond ourselves, that's the indicator of nature, of creation, of beauty. The second indicator that points beyond ourselves is our longing for justice. Think of all that we have experienced these past 3 years when it comes to injustice. Think of what has filled the headlines and filled the streets with protest. It's the cry of people who have experienced injustice. We all feel a longing for the world to be put right again. We all know the world is not as it should be. There's plenty that puts the beauty of God at risk in our world. Our world desperately needs healing. We all sense that. We all feel that. Where does that come from? Where does that sense come from? Where does that feeling come from? That desire for things to be right. I'm sure you've experienced this desire for justice as you've seen people living in extreme and unjust poverty. A few years ago, my wife and I were in Kenya's Mathare Valley, 5 square miles of cardboard and scrap metal housing with severe poverty and injustice. An infested ghetto where children get addicted to chemicals made from toxic wastewater, where young girls are daily abducted for sex trafficking. And as we walked through, I did not have words, except to say, this isn't the way the world is supposed to be. Something inside me was just repulsed. This is so wrong. We were with Convoy of Hope. And Convoy of Hope supports a school right on the edge of Mathare Valley where thousands of children are being fed, they're being clothed, they're being educated. Many are given a way out of this cycle of death. There is a God even in the darkest places. I'll never forget the joy I experienced being on my hands and knees and helping young children put their first pair of shoes on that were donated. Maybe you feel this longing for justice when you hear about another mass shooting, rampant theft. I just have to tell you, I'm getting mad. But I'm trying to submit that anger to God so that it can be constructive anger and not destructive anger. Rampant theft, violence committed against people groups just because of their race or their religion. It's not right, and we feel it deeply. Someone needs to do something. There's a moral alarm that is inside of us. Where does that moral alarm come from? Is it God? There are moral facts in the universe that every civilization believes that betraying a friend or lying to a family member or taking a life goes against moral virtue. This moral order points to the source of morality. It points to God, a God who is concerned with justice. God laid down 10 commandments, and our Constitution is based on those 10 commandments. The coins that we have has the name of God on them. The dollars that we spend, do you still have dollars? The dollars that we use say, in God we trust. But oh God, may that be more than just on our currency. May it be our life's currency. Again, the writer to the Romans says, even Gentiles, that's everybody other than Jews, that's us, even Gentiles who do not have God's written law show that they know his law when they instinctively obey it, even without having heard it. They demonstrate that God's law is written on their hearts, for their own conscience and thoughts either accuse them or tell them that they are doing right. Where does that come from? If there's no God, Where does this longing for moral order come from? Finally, another indicator of the presence of God is relationships. The Bible says, no one has ever seen God, but if we love one another, God lives in us and his love is made complete in us. Let me just talk to you folks that are followers of Jesus. People are watching your relationships. They're watching how you treat your husband. They're watching how you treat your wife. They're watching how you treat your children. They're watching how you treat your neighbors. They're watching how you treat the people at work. They're watching how you treat people of different races. They're watching how you treat your enemies. They're watching how you treat people who are not at all like you. People are watching for that, and what they're looking for is God really in relationships? And that's why a lot of people are leaving church. Because there's a lot of people who have a religion about God, but are not acting like they really believe in God. Okay, that wasn't in my notes. We all long to be in healthy relationships, meaningful relationships. Even when relationships are difficult and we feel like squaring off of those people around us, we still want someone there. We are made for relationships, and our experience of relationships points again toward God. Maybe you've experienced this in the birth of a child. When our second son, Tim, who's sitting on the front row with an eye patch on this morning, our second son, Tim, was born in Nebraska. I had the opportunity to be in the room, and the doctor looks up at me as he's holding him upside down, patting him on the rear end. The doctor says, "It's a miracle." And I'm going, "What?" He says, "Every time I deliver a baby, I see God give the first breath of life outside the mother's womb." Relationships point back towards a God who is the definition of love. The earliest Christ followers believed that this is what Jesus revealed about God. John, a much-loved follower of Jesus, writes this in 1 John 4:7. He says, "Dear friends, let us continue to love one another, for love comes from God. Anyone who loves is a child of God and knows God. But anyone who does not love does not know God, for God is love." The definition of love is God. That's what he's saying. Have we answered all the questions? Is there a God? Now, we'll continue to inquire, but he wants to make himself known to us. He wants us to seek him. Through the ancient prophet Jeremiah, God said to his people, "You will seek me and you will find me when you seek me with all of your heart." How much do you want to know God? How much do you really want to believe in God? If you seek me with all of your heart, I will be known by you, and you will be known by me. The 17th century mathematician Blaise Pascal, one of the greatest intellects in the history of Western civilization, had a passion to help others find their way to God. And he challenged them to wager. He said, "Make a bet that there is a God who loves you." I think we have a slide for this. Make a bet that maybe I guess we don't have a slide, so listen carefully. Make a bet that there is a God who loves you. If you are right, you have everything to gain, and if you're wrong, you have nothing to lose. Make a bet that God is real. I challenge you today, along with Pascal, make a bet that God is real. What is there to lose? So I invite you today, whether you're in this auditorium or whether you're just watching us online, to pray this simple prayer. God, if you're really real, reveal yourself to me. God, if you're really real, I humbly ask you to reveal yourself to me. And I also want to give you a second invitation. Second invitation is to join this conversation, to stay in this conversation of exploring God. Join us again next week when we ask, if there is a God, why does he allow suffering? Let me wrap it up this way. James, the brother of Jesus, wrote this in James chapter 5. He said, if anybody's suffering, let him call for the elders. That word elders means spiritual leaders, mature spiritual leaders. Let him call for the mature spiritual leaders to pray over them. He said, if you're happy, sing praises. But if you're suffering, pray. And then he said, and if you're suffering, call for these spiritual leaders to pray over you in the name of the Lord. And then he went on to say, and if there's anything wrong, like if you've done something wrong, if there's what they call sin, and you want healing and forgiveness, just be open about that with those people that pray for you, and you'll be forgiven, you'll be healed. He says, because the prayers of people who are right with God are very effective. And I'm kind of paraphrasing it, but that's exactly what it says in the book of James. So today, I want to invite you. We're going to stand in just a minute. And when we stand, I'm going to invite what we call our prayer team. That's these people, these elders, these trained, mature believers followers of Christ who know how to pray for people. I'm going to ask them to come. In fact, you can come right now, prayer team. And they're going to be on my left and my right. And if you're here today and you're suffering in any way, maybe you've been following Christ your whole life, or maybe you're just checking this thing out. But if you're suffering in any way, you're suffering physically, or you're suffering mentally, or you're suffering relationally. There's a relationship that's a struggle right now. Or you're suffering economically. Whatever the nature of that suffering might be, I'm gonna encourage you to step out of your seat when we all stand together. In fact, we're gonna sing one more song. So as we're singing, I'm gonna encourage you to just be bold and step out and say, yeah, I am suffering a little bit. And I would enjoy someone just praying a simple prayer over me. They won't keep you long. They're not gonna do anything weird. They're just going to lovingly pray for you this morning in whatever it is that you would like to bring to them. And if you're here and you're prayed that prayer that I prayed earlier, like, God, if you're real, just reveal yourself to me. Why don't you tell these people that? Just say, I'm seeking myself. I'm not sure I'm there yet, but I'm seeking. And let them just pray with you that God will reveal himself to you. All right? Let's stand. Our worship team is going to come, and we're going to sing a song. And then please stay with us, because I have one more thing I want to say to you before we go, after we worship together. But this is a great time to just step out of your seat and let someone pray with you for any kind of suffering that you're walking through right now.